Recording for anybody else? There we go. We're recording. Good. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're down to the second to last letter. We have one more to go next week. So you've hung in here pretty well. We're going to talk about a familiar city. Not really, but at least in name, anyhow. But let me pray, and then we'll commence. Gracious God, you have provided a beautiful day today, as are all days beautiful as gifts from you. But we're especially thankful for the blue skies and the gentle breeze and just a nice temperature before the heat comes. We're thankful that you care for us as you do. As we gather today, mindful of the fathers in our life, we give you gratitude for that, for them as well, and for the very important truth that you are our Heavenly Father above all else. So to you we come asking that you would continue to nurture us, grow us, challenge us, whatever it is you're doing through these passages, through these letters. May you meet us again today as we come. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Let me get the passage on the screen for those watching. There we go. All right. For the rest of you, I think you should have it in front of you. Let me read this first of all and just note your questions, your thoughts, and we'll go from there. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Look, I've set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but are lying, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you've kept my word of patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I'm coming soon. Hold fast to what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. If you conquer, I will make you a pillar in the temple of my God. You will never go out of it. I will write on you the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, that comes down from God out of heaven, in my own new name. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. The letter to the church in Philadelphia. Sorry, I forgot to keep scrolling. Oh, I was reading off my paper instead of the screen. So, having heard that, what questions, what comments, what observations, what thoughts, whatever. What do you want to share? Before I go into all my stuff. Any questions or initial observations?
He was happy with them.
He was happy with them. Yep. He was happy with them, as I might have indicated a while back with Smyrna, I think it was. Smyrna and Philadelphia, the two places that he says nothing negative about, no criticism. There is no this I have against you. Anything else you observed that you'd like to point out?
The key of David.
The key of David. Yeah. We'll get to that in a bit, but that's a new line. We haven't seen that one used before as kind of that descriptor of that Jesus gives to himself here. He does talk about being the Holy One, the true one, and having this key of David. So we'll try to make a little sense of that possibly. Because like we've talked about in every one of these letters, except for last week, there's always something that no one has a complete 100% certainty about as to what it means. And this is going to be one of those. We also, again, are reintroduced again to the synagogue of Satan concept, which appeared in a previous letter. Again, not 100% certainty of what that means, although this gives a little more, maybe a little more idea. We'll see about that. Any other questions or thoughts or observations? Well, let's talk about this Philadelphia, not our Philadelphia, but this one. Probably of the 7 cities, this is the newest of the 7 cities. The youngest, it was not an ancient city. You might recall some of the others were like ancient, maybe destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, but they had an ancient past to them. Philadelphia does not have that ancient past to it compared to the other 6. It was founded by and named after Attalus II Philadelphus of Pergamum. So we all know that the word Philadelphia means brotherly love. It still does, because Attalus had a brother who helped co-found the city with him, and Attalus had a great loyalty and devotion to his brother. So the Philadelphia not only encompassed part of his name, but it also was a description of the relationship he had with his brother, who was his co-founder of this city. Like many of the other 7, not all of them, but like several of them, it was a very strategically positioned city. Okay. In this case, it stood in a place where the borders of 3 countries, Mysia, Lydia, and Phrygia, they all kind of met there. So it was a border town. It was a town that bordered on 3 other towns. They all kind of met there. Kind of like go up on the Texter Mountain, and there's a spot where Lebanon, Berks, and Lancaster County all meet. And I think there's at least one property where the house is in one county and their yard is in another, something like that. Similar kind of deal here with Philadelphia in a way. So it was a border town, but what made it very strategic, you might remember, and I admit I get these mixed up from time to time. You might remember that we said Pergamum was kind of a gateway to the north, that beyond Pergamum, everything was kind of uncivilized. Philadelphia was a gateway to the east. Now, things were not uncivilized to the east. Things were, it was still part of Eastern Asia, so there's people and places out there. But what there wasn't to the east of Philadelphia is there was not the developing, growing, evolving Greek culture and Greek language and Greek way of life. That had become pretty much what took over the Roman Empire. It was still the Roman Empire, but everything became Greek by this time, which is right around the beginning of AD time period. Things were Hellenized. That's the word that's your big word for the day. You never heard it before. Is Hellenized, which means, and forgive me, it's been a long time and I forgot to kind of look it up, so I don't know how this has to do with Greek, but it does. So they were Greekized, if you will, at that time. However, everything east to Philadelphia had not been Greekized, had not been Hellenized. So Philadelphia became, ready? It became the doorway, the gateway to the east. And it's through that doorway and gateway, through Philadelphia, that it was believed that Greece, the Greek way of life and the Greek culture and the Greek language particularly was going to be taken. So that was very important to understand. They were moving from one continent, even though we're talking about this as being Asia, kind of it was the Roman Empire. They didn't have quite this continental breakup yet. This stuff was all, these 7 churches ultimately were still kind of part of that. What for us still is sort of, we don't know, is it Asia or is it Europe? That Middle Eastern territory. So you were moving kind of from one continent to another when you went through Philadelphia. The reason the city was built, supposedly, by Attalus was, in fact, literally to be that gateway. It was really built to be a missionary city, and that would have been the word they used. We think of missionaries as people carrying the word of God. Back then, missionary meant they were carrying the ways of the Greek culture. So Philadelphia became this missionary city spreading the Greek language and culture and civilization. So it also lay on the edge of a great geological plain. Right? So it was situated in this great plain, Plain area, which also was notable for its volcanic activity. So if you remember, it was Sardis that was destroyed in AD 17 by an earthquake. And Tiberius, remember me saying, kicked in like $600,000 to rebuild Sardis. Well, there's not a whole lot of distance here when you look at your paper from Sardis to Philadelphia. So the same earthquake that took Sardis down took Philadelphia down. Okay, the same Tiberius who gave $600,000 to rebuild Sardis also gave significant money to rebuild Philadelphia. To the point that for a period of time, Philadelphia changed its name. Keep that in the back of your mind. Changed its name to Neo Caesarea. Caesarea meaning Caesar, the new town of Caesar. Out of gratitude for Caesar Tiberius's gift to rebuild the city, they renamed themselves to Neo Caesarea. Now, subsequently, eventually, other Caesars renamed it back to Philadelphia, went back and forth for a bit. But that's something that happened 17 AD and thereafter when the town was rebuilt. Because there was such continual recurring earthquake threats in this vicinity, it was also a town where people felt a bit threatened to live in the town itself or to stay there too long for fear that buildings are going to crash in on them, because that's what happened. So Philadelphia also was notable for people who did one of two things. They either kind of lived on the outskirts of the town itself, kind of outside of town, or they were just known for people who were coming and going all the time, because if there's any rumble, boom, they're out of town. They're waiting it out there before everything settles. So they left and came back, and that sort of thing. Again, an image that we'll return to shortly. So there was kind of this constant rhythm of flight and return of the population of the town. They also were a famous center for some heathen worship. They were nicknamed the Little Athens, Greece, which was a hotbed for temples and worship of other gods. If you remember the story of Paul coming to Athens, where he sat down with all the philosophers and people talking to them about God and saying that their gods were not the God. So Athens was famous for those different worships, pagan worships, and to the point that Philadelphia was sometimes considered Little Athens. There was also a custom in the temples in Philadelphia, and perhaps in some of the other heathen temples around the area, but specifically known in Philadelphia. When a person in the community served the state well, when they were, you know, admirable statesman or citizen or whatever, they had a noble record as a magistrate or a public benefactor or a priest even in the temple. The memorial that the city would give for them was to erect a pillar in one of the temples, okay, and inscribe their name on the pillar. Those have been archaeologically found, okay. So that's what one of the customs was, to honor their citizens and to honor prominent people among them. It did, as it's kind of said in the letter and beyond, it remained a Christian city in a very strong Muslim context. Around it was a lot of Muslim places eventually, all the way up to the 14th century. Philadelphia stayed strong as a Christian city, even though everything around it eventually became fell to Islam. Supposedly to this day, and I think it's renamed, I forget what it's named now, but to this day in that town, there's still a Christian bishop that serves that town in that area, even though it too has become prominently Muslim. There's still Christianity and a Christian leader there. So that's a little bit about Philadelphia that is helpful to the background of some of the things that are stated in here that might seem a bit cryptic or symbolic. It makes a little more sense when you know some of these things, and I'll kind of point them out as we go along. It's also interesting to note, as we said about Smyrna being the other letter that in which Jesus did not issue a criticism of the church. There's a lot of similarities between the letter to Smyrna, back on chapter 2, verses 8 to 11, and this letter. Both of them, as we said, received no blame for anything, only praise. Both of them had to go through the suffering. It appears some suffering related to people who called themselves Jews but were not. That phrase appears in both. It seems that they both were experiencing some kind of persecution from the outside by the Romans, most likely. They were told that their opposition was some satanic in nature. So both the letters involve synagogue of Satan or Satan. And then they are both promised a crown. So in Smyrna, there's a mention near the end about receiving a crown if you conquer. Same thing happens here with Philadelphia. So a lot of similarities there. Now, one thing that's not similar to Smyrna's letter or to any of the other letters, or even to chapter 1, is the title that Jesus gives himself initially. These are the words of the Holy One, the True One. Okay? That was not all the other introductions Jesus gives himself in the letters take some phrase out of chapter 1. We said that with each one. The phrase Holy One and True One does not appear in chapter 1. In fact, I don't think it appears anywhere in Revelation. It's a bit unusual because I think I said this near the end of our class last week. We'll find that almost every one of these letters, there's something in it that kind of appears later in the book of Revelation. So that there's definitely some connection to all that symbolic, figurative stuff from chapter 4 on to chapter 22 that we can't always make heads or tails of. There's always something in there that comes back to one or more of these 7 letters. But one, Holy One and True One, does not. It is a title, however, that, in other words, it was not attributed to Jesus. It is attributed to God. So if you go to chapter 6, verse 10 of Revelation, you will see that the Holy and True One is God who sits on the throne. Here, Jesus is applying it to himself. Holy is a word that's usually connected with a deity, and it primarily means that he is identifying himself as set apart, separate from everything else. That's what holy means. It's sacred in the sense that if you have something that's holy, it may appear to be like something else that's normal. If you have a holy set of if you know, in the Old Testament it talks about utensils that are used in the temple, basins and plates and things like that for offerings on the altar. Some of them were holy and some of them were common. So they look the same. It's just some were blessed to be set apart for something sacred, for the work of the actual altar and offerings. So Jesus is identifying himself as one who is set apart. And true isn't really true as in true or false question, but true as in real, genuine, not an illusion, but he really is true. He really exists and he really is who he says he is, which is probably what's alluded to here, because part of what's going on by now in the churches amongst the Jews, remember, most everybody in the churches still at this point are probably Jewish. The only difference is they believe Jesus is the Messiah that they were waiting for. So the oppositional Jews, possibly the synagogue of Satan, are those who are challenging that and closing their doors, beginning to close their doors to these Jews who follow all the Jewish customs and rites and everything else. It's just they believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So when Jesus says, I'm the one, holy one, the true one, there's a belief there that he's kind of indicating, I am that true Messiah. I'm the real deal. And then when he adds to it, who has the key of David, that's a Jewish reference, obviously, the king of the Jews, David. And the Messiah was said to be of the lineage of David. So Jesus is probably pulling in that key of David thing partially as a way of acknowledging himself as this Messiah, as the one who is taking care of the God of Israel's things. That is probably also supported by the fact that this phrase, he who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens, directly comes from the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 22. Let me just read a few verses for you, three verses out of which this comes. It's about, Isaiah's talking about a steward in King Hezekiah's court, Eliakim. King Hezekiah gave Eliakim, his steward, the authority to deal with everything, which in essence, in the way that stuff went back then, if a king gave the key, the seal, to a steward, that meant that steward basically was the king. He could do anything the king could do in the king's absence. So we're told, on that day I will call my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and will clothe him with your robe and bind your sash on him. I will commit your authority to his hand, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. He shall open, and no one shall shut. He shall shut, and no one shall open. So Jesus uses a direct quote from Isaiah as an identification of himself. He is the Eliakim of God's house, of God's thing. He has the key and he has the authority to open and to close. Again, the Jews at the time would have claimed to be the true holy people of God. And here Jesus is saying, and that they hold the key of David's house. Jesus is saying, I'm the one holy, true holder of David's keys. I know your works, verse 8. Now, somehow this eluded me until I got to this letter in my studies. I know I told you several times that when we go to the end of the letter, let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. What did I tell you about that phrase? It appears in every letter. I know your works appears in every letter. I did not realize that until I was studying this. That phrase also appears in every letter. Jesus speaks to every one of the churches, whether he's going to critique them or praise them or both. He starts off by saying, I know your works. Look, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. Again, not only is that a reference to Isaiah 22, but just as importantly, Jesus is personalizing his instructions or his comments to this church of Philadelphia, because this church of Philadelphia has been created to be a door for Hellenization. Okay? That is what they're known for. They're being that door to the east. And Jesus says, I have set before you an open door, which no one's able to shut. Maybe king or builder of the town, Attalus, maybe the Roman emperor and Caesar declared that this city has an open door to the east to spread the Greek ways. Jesus is saying, I've opened a door. You're spreading my ways. Okay. There is some debate about what, because he doesn't really say it that literally. He just says that I've set before you an open door. He doesn't say for what purpose. Now, most assume that since it was considered a missionary city for this, Jesus is just taking that, saying, you are a missionary city. I've opened a door for you to spread the good news of the gospel. And that probably sits the most. However, there's no certainty of that, and there's others who suggest that Jesus is saying, I am the open door. I set before you myself. Just like he says in John chapter 10, I have these sheep, I'm the gate through which the sheep come. He might be saying here that he's the open door. It might be a reference, some say it's a reference to prayer, that Jesus set open the ability for these people to be having access to God in prayer. And others have suggested that he's talking about, as he does in many of these letters, what seems to be a more heavenly glory in the midst of their problems and persecution. Just know I've opened the door for your heavenly glory when the time comes. Most likely, it is a suggestion that he's opened a door for missionary work, for them to spread the good news of Christ. What's really important to note in this letter, or not as important as maybe inspiring, is he says, I know that you have but little power. Okay? This church was a small, poor, powerless church in a very Hellenized, Greekized, heathen city. There was just a small faction of Christians. But you have kept my word and have not denied my name. They have been faithful. Even small, the size did not matter. Their power was in their faithfulness. So that's one of those lessons we have to kind of keep in mind At any given time in our lives and our lives of any church, especially in the day when things are declining for churches in Christianity, we think we're losing power. We think we're losing influence. My belief is, yeah, we're probably losing the power that we weren't supposed to have in the first place, that kind of earthly power. But we will never lose. If we're faithful, we will never lose the power of Christ. This church had not embraced heretical teachings. They had not denied the name of Christ. Evidently, as it seems to be implied here, they are facing some kind of persecution, but the people of this little church were able to stand still and stand up to it and continue to be faithful. I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but are lying. I will make them come and bow down before your feet. This is probably, again, a reference to opposition that was developing, that was growing significantly between the Jews who believed themselves to be the people of God and holding the key of David and had it all right, who were beginning to most likely turn away, close the door to the Jews who were believing in Jesus and declaring him the Messiah. It would seem they were probably denying them access, and the only way back in, ready for this? The only way back in would be for them to bow down and renounce. Jesus says here, I will make that synagogue of Satan. Again, Satan being a word for the one who deceives, the one who lies. I will make them come and bow down before your feet. So there is this contrast that seems to have been evolving here that's starting to really become obvious. And they will learn that I have loved you. In other words, they will learn that as much as I loved and held the Jews as my people, I have also loved those who have accepted who I am. That same love is for them too. Now, verse 10 starts with the word because. Most translations probably have something because or since. Not that this is a big deal, but I'll show you. Let me show you here how Bible interpretation, Bible translation is a difficult thing to do with 100% certainty. First of all, what most people do not know, and you only learn this in college, I guess. Maybe you did learn this. But the New Testament, which we're reading here, was written in Greek. It was written in all capital lettered Greek with no punctuation. So try to take a paragraph in English, take out all punctuation, make everything a capital, which means you don't know when a sentence really starts or ends. There's no periods, there's no commas, no capitalization of the first letter of the first word in a new sentence. So interpreters have to read these old documents, parchments, and sort of have to figure out the context as they read a big pile of information and step back and kind of insert commas and the new paragraphs and the periods. Over time, we feel like over 2,000 years and the scholarship and all that are probably pretty accurate most of the way, but there's occasional places where, not sure, it doesn't really change the content, but it could. And one of those is verse 10. So because there's no way of knowing for sure grammatically if the because or the since belongs to what comes before or what comes next. So in other words, what we could be reading here is, I will make them come and bow down before your feet because you've kept my word, because you kept my word of patient endurance. I will make them come and bow down at your feet because you've been faithful. Or it can be read, because you have kept my word of patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that's coming in the whole world. My translation is the second one. I don't know about yours, probably most of yours is. But there's absolutely no way to know 100% for certain how it is. Is that keeping his word of endurance the reason why others are going to come and bow down at their feet? Or is keeping that word of endurance going to result in being kept from an hour of trial? That doesn't affect anything in some ways. Keeping the word of endurance is what matters. Being faithful and hanging in there. There may be different results for different people. But I point that out just to again show you that this is not just in Revelation, this can be in any book of the New Testament, but to add to the challenges of Revelation of having images that we're not 100% certain of what they are. There are occasional challenges of punctuation as well, like that. Either way, the key is that they have kept his word of patient endurance. They have kept steadfast. They have kept the word of God's steadfastness. And might even be better translated, the teaching which was exemplified in my steadfastness. In other words, you have kept to the teaching that has been known because of my steadfastness as your God. You believed that I'm with you no matter what. That's what he's saying. You have kept that through the thick and the thin of persecution, through the thick and the thin of this Jewish opposition. You have kept to the belief, and you have lived out the belief that I am always there with you, hanging in there with you. My patient endurance, my steadfastness. I will keep you from the hour of trial. Again, there's two equally possible translations. I will keep you from undergoing the trial, or I will keep you right through the trial. So we're not sure if Jesus is saying, you're going to be exempt, I'm going to keep you from going through it, or if you're going to go through it, but I'm going to be with you through it. It can be interpreted either way. Again, either way, this church is going to be blessed with God helping them in the midst of a trial that is coming to the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. This is the only explicit reference in any of the 7 letters to an approaching worldwide ordeal. So here we get a glimpse into probably what is described in symbolic terms and figuratively in chapters 4 through 22. There is this ordeal that seems to be alluded to in the rest of the book, and it's only to the Philadelphians that he indicates some worldwide ordeal going to happen. But he calls it a test, to test the inhabitants of the earth, which is an interesting word because it continues, because that word or the idea has appeared in other letters to the churches that Jesus has a problem with. All of them still have access to grace. So when Jesus says there's going to be this worldwide ordeal to test the inhabitants of the earth, test indicates that this isn't intended to destroy everybody. This isn't intended to condemn everybody. This is intended to give a test to them. Now, there may be failures, but everybody's got a shot. Everybody's going to have a chance to endure, go through this test. I'm coming soon. Hold fast to what you have so that no one may seize your crown. It might be better to see that you do not forfeit your crown. Okay? because nobody can really take the crown of Christ from us. But perhaps we can forfeit it, which is the fear that's going on with these churches. Just like the very first church, Ephesus. If you guys don't get back to your first love, we're going to stuff out the candle. In this case, people are going to lose the crown. To serve God is a high privilege, but that service can be withdrawn and given to another, which seems to be, again, what was threatened with Ephesus. It's what happened with King Saul. God put his spirit on King Saul, but King Saul was unfaithful, so God took that spirit and put it upon the shepherd out in the fields named David. And he became the king. If you conquer, I will make you a pillar in the temple of my God. You will never go out of it. I will write on you the name of my God and the name of the city of my God. The new Jerusalem comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. I'm putting all that together because it should take you to what I told you earlier happens in this city in their heathen temples. When somebody has been a faithful servant, magistrate, priest, or whatever, they honor them by giving them a pillar in a temple, in one of the temples, and putting their name on it. Jesus says, I'm going to do that for you in the temple of God. If you conquer, I'll make you a pillar. You yourself will be a pillar in that temple. You will never go out of it. Again, personalized to Philadelphia. What did we say about the people of Philadelphia? They fled the city quite frequently. They went outside of the city quite a lot for fear of the earthquakes. Jesus says, you're going to be in a city that you don't ever have to flee. I will make you a pillar. You will never have to go out of it. And I'll write on you the name of my God, the name of the city of God, the new Jerusalem that's coming down, and my own new name. Okay? So, yeah, those three things. You're going to write God's name because that's who you belong to. Not the Romans, not the Greeks, not these other gods, not the Jews. You belong to God. So your name, the name of God's going to be written on you. The New Jerusalem's name is going to be written on you because that's where you were a citizen. You're not a citizen of Philadelphia. You're not a citizen of Ephesus. You're not a citizen of Sardis. You're not a citizen of the Roman Empire. You're a citizen of the New Jerusalem. And I'm going to put my own name on it, Jesus, because that's your new identity. That's your new state of affairs, Jesus. Let anyone who has an ear to listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So that is our letter to the Philadelphians. What sort of questions or comments does that elicit in you? Like always, we cover a lot of ground here, but what kind of things does that cause you to think about?
You were talking about chapter 10. Isn't that when the church will be raptured before the Great Tribulation?
I don't know if did I mention chapter 10 for some reason?
I mean, verse 10. What?
Verse 10.
Yeah.
Because you have kept my word.
Really talking about the rapture before the tribulation?
Some would interpret it that way. Again, if we go back to the first thing I talked about here, there's all sorts of ways to look at that whole pre-tribulation, post-tribulation, all that kind of thing. Most of the things I read didn't really bring that up, which was interesting. And because I read from commentators who would actually ascribe to what you're saying, but didn't seem to attribute that to this particular verse.
And here, this is King James Version. Down at the end it says, in verse 13, the Spirit is saying we must ready for the rapture, which can only be done by faith constantly exhibited in Christ and his finished work.
Yeah, and so that commentary of that study Bible definitely takes that approach to this is referencing the rapture, which is Very, very valid. Yeah. Thanks for putting that in there.
It kind of echoes a little bit that particular verse, the line in the Lord's Prayer where it says, "Save us from the time of trial."
Mm-hmm. Yes. Keep us from temptation. Yeah, exactly. And again, this doesn't help matters. Like if you use the interpretation of verse 10 that says, "I will keep you from the hour trial," it would fit with that notion. But if the interpretation, which is just as valid, is, "I will keep you through the trial," then it doesn't necessarily, wouldn't quite fit into the rapture idea. It's saying, you're going to go through this, but I'm going to go with you. Other observations or thoughts? For me, I think the prominent idea here, going kind of back to the city itself and what it was all about, and how Jesus addresses them right from the start, is this notion of being an open door, and that they have remained, so to speak, an open door for the work of Jesus, even though many have tried to close their door, from persecution to the lies of the synagogue of Satan. Others are trying to close them, so to speak, but they remain open because Jesus has made them an open door, which only He can close. And He's not closing it. He doesn't give them that, He doesn't threaten them with that, like He, again, always going back to the Ephesus church, like He threatened the Ephesus church. He didn't use the door image there, He used the candle image. Will snuff out your light. Here, if there was a threat, or if he had a problem with the Philadelphia church, he probably would have said, shape up or I'm going to close your door. So using different metaphors. But he does not threaten that here. Because of their faithfulness, they're going to keep being an open door. And being open is also part of their faithfulness.
Also says that he shuts it and no one opens it.
He does say that. He can shut a door and no one opens it. But he, in reference to them, verse 8, he says, "I know your works. Look, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut." Yes, he can, like we said, but no one else is able to shut them because of their subsequent faithfulness.
Does it mean he's going to shut up the church?
What's that?
What does it mean if he could shut the church?
He could. I think so. Just like we said in the first letter to the Ephesus, he says, "I could blow out your candle." Which it's kind of serious business. He's kind of saying, he's not saying I don't think Jesus is ever saying I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing. It's just I can move on to someone else. I can move on to a different church. I can move on to a different group. I can open the door somewhere else. And apparently, I think history would show he does sometimes. Just because the church is a church doesn't always mean that we're following the Spirit and in the name of the Lord. So sometimes things will end. But it can be like whichever, again, I can't keep these straight in my mind, but it might be like the church where he says, everybody thinks you're doing great, everybody thinks you're alive, but you're dead. So some are dead, but even though they keep going and looking like to everybody else like they're still a church, Jesus isn't there, or they haven't been following him. Any other thoughts or observations? Because we will move to the last one next week. Laodicea or something like that. Hard to pronounce that one. Too many vowels in there.
I have a map of this.
Yes.
Would this be, based on the map, would this be considered the quote front line of Christianity there, or? No, you're at the Aegean Sea. I mean, did it progress further west?
Yes. Yes. So this, you're right. This would have been, because like I said, if you go further east and further north, it was sort of uncivilized and you're getting a different territory. And these would have been some of the earlier parts taken over by Islam as it came from the east and the north.
And this is Turkey now.
It is basically Turkey. It's in the Turkey region now. Yeah.
But it was a good trading area, so that, of course, is where all the cities developed.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Next week's will be more familiar to you probably because I think it has two really familiar verses or concepts in that letter that have stood the test of time. I think you'll know them when you hear them or read them. So we will finish our venture next Sunday. So thanks for being here, everybody. And those of you on Zoom, if somehow it all ends, just come back on. So I don't know what will happen when we start up there. Sometimes it kicks things all apart. So, all righty. And don't worry if you lose the picture of this room because I'm going to shut that off, shut the picture off anyway, and the sound.